Right now, I am in the town of Gettysburg, where in July of 1863, one of the most titanic battles of the Civil War was fought. There are all kinds of tragic stories that emerged from that three-day battle. But one of the most tragic stories is probably that of Jennie Wade, who was the only civilian in Gettysburg to have been killed during the battle. Right now I'm standing in front of the Jennie Wade house, right here on Cemetery Hill. We've actually done a video here that I'll link in the description. It was thought that she was hit by a Confederate sharpshooter's bullet that was fired from the Sweeney house just down the road. I did a video there as well. Well, the Jennie Wade story is compelling in all kinds of different ways and tragic in all kinds of different ways. And there are some amazing artifacts connected to Jennie Wade at the Gettysburg Museum of History that we're going to go take a look at today. Now, after you visit the Jennie Wade house here in Gettysburg, your next stop really needs to be the Gettysburg Museum of History, because take a look at this. Here at the museum, they have all kinds of artifacts that are tied to Jennie Wade. Now, we have a video from way back on our first visit here to the Gettysburg Museum of History, where we talk about, some of these letters and some of these private correspondences that Jennie Wade had. And in that video, we mentioned something. Now they've opened the glass case for me, so I'm going to slide this over. But some of these letters are cut up and were censored. And there's a note that says, "Letters destroyed. Just boy and girl chatter of no interest to prying and critical eyes of others." So there are all kinds of interesting things on display here at the Gettysburg Museum of History tied to Jennie Wade. But there are some things in the archives that have really only been seen by a few people.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we got the Jennie Wade letters and a little bit more information about them, because how we got them is almost as interesting as the letters themselves. Many years ago, there was a lady writing a book about Jack Skelly, and it was called My Country Needs Me. And she was a historian, and she did some research, and she was getting ready to publish this book, and she asked us if I would be willing to let her use one of the photographs we had of Jack Skelly. Now, Jack Skelly is Jennie Wade's boyfriend. They were a couple. He was in the 87th Pennsylvania, and of course Jennie Wade, in case we don't know the story, is the only civilian who was killed here during the battle. And so I let this lady who was writing a book have a copy of one of our photographs of Jack Skelly. And she wrote the book, and she one day dropped the book off here. And I sat it aside. I looked to make sure the photo was credited to us, because that's all we ask for usually, is to be credited. And she did, and I put it aside. And then people who are Gettysburg fans will know that licensed battlefield guide Tim Smith is probably the biggest Jennie Wade fan in the world. He loves Jennie Wade. And so one day I was in here, and Tim Smith comes crashing through the door practically. It reminded me of the television show Seinfeld when Kramer comes through the door. It was very, very dramatic. And he had the book that this lady, Enrique D'Alessandra, wrote, and he goes, "Did you see this book?" And I said, "Yeah, she dropped a copy off and I haven't read it yet." And he goes, "She found the Jennie Wade letters." And I was like, wow, we had always thought there were some Jennie Wade letters around. One of them was published years ago in one of William Frazanito's book. So we kind of thought there were letters around, but nobody had ever pursued them except for Enrique. So good for her. So I looked, and sure enough, the letters are in here. She has them just transcribed in here. Tim says, you need to get those letters. You need to call her up and find out where she got them. So anyway, I got the number. I called these people. Very nice people. They were fairly local. And they came down here. And they brought the letters. And I said I'd be interested in buying them or, donating them or whatever for the museum. I'd really like to get them. Because the content of the letters are pretty amazing. We'll get into that in a bit. So they came down here. And they weren't sure. They didn't really know what they wanted to do. They also had a lot of items from the Skelly family, and the way they got him was, Jack Skelly was mortally wounded, and he died of his wounds, and his family went down to pick up his remains, and he had these Jennie Wade letters on him, and so when they brought his body back, they got these letters, and there was also some paperwork that's in the case back there about them picking up the body of Jack Skelly. And so, they're amazing. I mean, there's all kinds of letters. They're transcribed in this book. But one of the interesting things was that some of them were cut in the middle. Part of it was removed. And there's a couple of those that we have. And next to that was a letter that said, Jennie Wade's letters, and JD had said about the prying eyes and boy and girl chatter. So the Skelly family thought enough to save these letters. Jennie Wade became famous right after the battle. But they didn't want some of the content being known. So there was probably romantic, we theorized romantic or maybe even a little risque stuff being written there by Jennie Wade to Jack Skelly. So they were not sure if this was the right place for them and everything. And this building, the Gettysburg Museum of History, was my great-grandfather and grandfather's house. So when I'm looking at these, I turned this note around, and it had a name and a number. It says, member, write your first and middle name in full. Edward J. Peffer. That is my great-grandfather. And when I saw that, I couldn't believe it. And I said, hey, that's my great-grandfather to the people that had the letters. And I said, and they're like, wow, that's really a weird coincidence. And I said, do you realize right now you are standing in Edward Peffer's house? And they went white, they just were like, whoa. She goes, I think this is the right place for these letters. That was the extra nudge, that really strange coincidence. Now, it wasn't so strange to me because I knew that Daniel Skelly, Jack Skelly's brother, who helped go down and get his remains, and my great-grandfather Edward Peffer were friends. They were both involved with the Masonic Lodge here, and I knew that because my great-grandfather had some books that belonged to Daniel Skelly that had his name, and he must have loaned them to him or given them to him after he passed away. Daniel Skelly was a little bit older than my great-grandfather, so I knew they had a relationship, so they were buddies. But that was just such a bizarre coincidence that they ended up here with and that note that they made on there had my great-grandfather's name on it. So they ended up here, and I'm very happy that they're here. And there's several letters. We have a bunch of them on display, and we also have a bunch in our archive. And we don't display everything. We can't just have a bunch of letters out, but there's several that we don't display, but we have in our archive, and they're amazing. And besides what we learned from them was Jack Skelly and Jennie Wade were not just childhood friends; they were romantically involved. And the other interesting thing about these letters that I thought was interesting, over the years there's been a controversy whether Jennie Wade was Jennie Wade with a J or Jennie Wade with a G. and because her real name was Mary Virginia Wade, and so she went by Jennie or Ginny. And so the answer to the question is both are correct, because she signed her name both ways in these letters. So sometimes she signed Ginny, and sometimes she signed Jennie with a J, and sometimes she wrote Mary Virginia Wade. But if you want to learn more, and another thing I just wanted to say, we also have some of the stuff from when Jack Skelly's family went down to pick up the remains. We have some Jack Skelly letters that we got, and we have the deed to the Jennie Wade house on Breckenridge Street, and a bunch of Wade family documents that we got from another source. But if you want to read the letters transcribed, get this book, My Country Needs Me, The Story of Corporal Johnston Hastings Skelly Jr., Jack Skelly, by Enrique D'Alessandra. You can buy it at our website, GettysburgMuseumofHistory.com, and you can read the Jennie Wade letters for yourself. They're amazing, and what a great archive, and we're very grateful that they're here at the Gettysburg Museum of History.
All right, well, that's just a little bit more on Jennie Wade, who was a 20-year-old girl who was the only civilian casualty to have died during the battle. Now, there were some people who died from unexploded ordnance after the battle, but Jennie Wade is the only one to have lost her life, well, only civilian to have lost her life during the three-day battle on July 3rd of 1863. So whenever you come to Gettysburg, definitely come to the Jennie Wade house and walk through and kind of immerse yourself in the history of what happened here. And then just go right down Baltimore Street to the Gettysburg Museum of History and see some of the artifacts that is connected with one of the most tragic stories to come out of the Battle of Gettysburg.